Welcome to the TalentGrow Show, where you can get actionable, results-oriented insight and advice on how to take your leadership, communication, and people skills to the next level and become the kind of leader people want to follow. And now, your host and leadership development strategist, Halelly Azulay.
Hey there, talent growers. Welcome back to another episode of the TalentGrow Show. I'm Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist here at TalentGrow. TalentGrow is my company that I have been running for over 13 years now that is developing leaders that people actually want to follow. And so TalentGrow sponsors this show. And this is a solo episode in which I typically cover some aspect of my area of expertise at conferences or meetings or during some of my workshops. And this particular topic is also a topic of a blog post that I wrote on my blog that has been one of the most popular blog posts that I've ever had. So I thought it would be great to have it in an audio format for you to be able to listen to it on the show. So if you prefer to read, I will link to the blog post as well. This episode is called What the FFF, or How to Avoid Triggering Fight, Flight, or Freeze Response in Others. Okay, let's take a listen. Here we go. Humans are tricky creatures. Even though we have these amazing brains that are able to devise unbelievable innovations like flying a spaceship to the moon or unmanned drones to deliver a pizza or creating cars that can drive themselves or to 3D print a heart to replace a heart that's not working, we also get spooked out really easily by things that when you think about them are pretty stupid or seemingly trivial. And that makes our communication in the workplace and elsewhere also very difficult, even in situations that on the surface should not be that hard. And when we have those kinds of communication situations, we typically experience one of three infamous types of reactions: fight, flight, or freeze. So if we have a fight reaction, then we attack the thing or the person that seems to be threatening us. When we have a flight reaction, we tend to want to run like hell from the thing or the person that's threatening us. And when we have a freeze reaction, we kind of act like a deer in the headlights and lose the ability to move or think straight for a few seconds or sometimes a few minutes, and they usually feel like hours and days. So these three kinds of responses, fight, flight, or freeze, are really old responses. They are actually affiliated with our existence from before we evolved as a species into the Homo sapiens that we are today. And in fact, it's something that we share with animals. And this reaction is designed to keep us alive. Our brain's number one job is to keep us alive. Everything else is secondary. And so back in the early days of humans as a species, we were kind of walking the tundra. We were cavemen. We were walking around on the prairie or in the jungle, and we needed to be prepared to deal with our environment and sudden changes. So if you were walking around in the jungle as a caveman and you heard a rustling around from a pile of leaves that was nearby, then your brain needed to help you act quickly and not to think about it too long to keep you alive, because there was a pretty good chance that there was some kind of a saber-toothed tiger in the leaves or some other predator that was going to turn you into human sashimi. We don't want that, right? So there were three choices really in that moment. Be ready to attack the predator, which is pretty bad as a choice if you are a human versus a tiger, because we don't really stand a good chance to fight them, by the way, which is why we developed really clever weapons. Or you could freeze and play dead, not a good choice. Or you could run like all heck. Ding, 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 ding. That is probably your best choice. But you don't have a long time to ponder any of this in that moment. When you hear the leaves rustling, you need to be able to act quickly to save yourself, which is why your brain is designed to react first and think later. And so this is not earth-shattering information, right? You are aware of this. And the good thing is that we have evolved a great deal since then. And none of us work or most of us, if you're listening to a podcast, you're probably not working in an environment where a tiger attack is imminent. In fact, probably very, very little physical violence threat exists in your workplace, if any, I hope. But here's the thing. While we all recognize that we experience this reaction when we have some kind of a physical attack that is imminent, what we don't usually think about in terms of this reaction being a valid reaction is in some kind of a social situation or an emotional offense. But what's amazing is that even though we have evolved a great deal in terms of our physical safety, we have, thanks to the field of neuroscience and cognitive science and lots of other fields of science, we have unmistakable proof that for a long time observed but weren't sure about, that threats to our social well-being are actually perceived in the same way by our brain as threats to our physical well-being. So you actually are going to experience that kind of fight, flight, or freeze reaction in the same place in the brain, often with the same intensity, whether you are being physically threatened or you have some kind of a social situation. For example, there were studies that had people sitting around in a lab room, in some kind of a conference room, and they were told that they were part of a study and they're going to be in a focus group. And a person walked in with a white lab coat and a clipboard, and they were the official focus group leader. And people were hooked up to fMRI machines. These are machines that help study the intensity of reactions in your brain and the location of them. And they were told, okay, everybody's input is really important. We're going to study your reactions, and everybody is encouraged to give input. But what happened in this study is they rigged it such that the experimenter, the leader, kept ignoring one particular person's input. Like they would ask everybody else for their input, but they would ignore one of them. And guess what part of that person's brain lit up like a Christmas tree in exactly the same place with the same intensity as if it were threatened by a tiger about to attack it? Yeah. The person who was just merely overlooked for their input in some fake study where they knew that they were in a study and they were hooked up to the machine, and yet their brain reacted with a threat response reaction. So this is the part that makes our workplace really tricky, because not only this, but your brain is actually designed not only to react very impulsively to these kinds of threats and to treat the social threat as intensely and as realistically as physical threat, but this threat response that happens in the oldest part of your brain, the limbic system, and in the center of it, the amygdala, which is a small almond-shaped area of your brain that helps you remember where there is something is a threat to be avoided or a reward to be sought after. This kind of a reaction, studies have shown that your brain is taking about a fifth of a second to process the cues, perceive the threat or the reward, and act. A fifth of a second. That is a very short amount of time. So once you have this perceived threat and your brain decides to react in a fight or flight way, it actually has to arrange for extra resources to help you successfully fight or successfully run away. So it lines up oxygen and glucose that it anticipates you'll need to successfully fight or successfully run. And it actually makes them less available to your prefrontal cortex, to the part of your brain that is used for rational thinking and executive functions like making decisions and solving problems. In addition, your brain will create overall increase in the activity that causes you to focus really narrowly, like tunnel vision. And it will cause you to miss a bunch of other subtle cues that are in the environment or contextual information, and it makes you less likely to be aware or capable of solving problems in a linear, rational way. So you become more likely to jump to conclusions. You're also more likely to generalize and make the wrong connections, and you're more likely to play it safe and to recoil from opportunities that are not a sure bet. And if that's not enough, then you're also more likely to become more defensive and more pessimistic. You're more likely to assume the worst and assume negative intent on the part of the others in the situation, as well as assume the worst of the situation and its root cause, or being less likely to see opportunities for solutions. Yikes. So how do we avoid triggering this kind of fight, flight, or freeze, or FFF threat response in others? Because if you recognize now that this happens to humans naturally in these kinds of situations, in any kind of work situations where the person's feeling threatened, then you need to be aware of the kinds of things that typically do trigger this kind of social threat so that you can minimize them. Well, I've done a lot of research on this, and I found that one particular thinker, researcher named Dr. David Rock, he's a neuroscientist, and he has come up with a way to remember the kinds of things that trigger that threat response in social situations in an acronym. He named the acronym SCARF, and it stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And these are the kinds of things that we seek to protect and that can trigger a threat response in us if we feel like they are endangered. And these are true in all of our life situations and all of our communication situations, and most definitely true in workplace situations. So I'm going to explain each of these a little bit more. But what I really think is going to be helpful to you is to recognize these so that you can be on the lookout proactively for places where we might cause someone to become triggered into this kind of a threat response, and preemptively try to minimize that. Because as I just described, they're less likely to be open to ideas. They're less likely to be open to feedback. They're more likely to get defensive and negative. They're more likely to become tunnel vision. And all of these things do not bode well for communication in the workplace. So as leaders, we need to be proactively not only aware, but proactively vigilant to minimize triggering this kind of response in the people that we speak with, our colleagues, our boss, our team, anybody, a client, anybody that you're communicating with. So what I want to do is briefly describe each of these domains, each of these elements that we seek to protect and that can cause us to feel threatened if they're endangered in some way, and give you a quick example of what might threaten it and what might prop it up. Okay? And that is, again, using David Rock's acronym SCARF. So S in SCARF stands for status. Status means that we want to be on a very good place in the social hierarchy of any group that we belong to. Again, if you think about our primitive early days as humans, the reason for this is if you think about a tribe of cavemen or a family or, whatever, a group of people, they had to have each other's cooperation in order for any of them to survive. No one person can really survive on their own in the kind of conditions that those people were subjected to. So built into our biology is a need to stay on good social standing, and that means to be in a good status. This is why people seek to elevate their status. This is why people want to have promotions. This is why people want to have high status and to be richer than others or stronger or more powerful or have more influence. But we kind of feel like we want to at least have equal status to those around us. Because if you're on the low end of the totem pole in terms of your status, then you're probably going to be the last one to hear that a neighboring tribe is infiltrating our camp, or that there was a tiger spotted in the woods right nearby. You're going to be the last to get the news that will help you survive. And you're going to potentially be the one that's being offered up as tiger snacks if the rest of your tribe doesn't see you as a high status individual and wants to escape and kind of sacrifice you. Now, this is back in the old days, but in the workplace, what happens is because this kind of a trigger is biologically embedded into our whole being, and we haven't evolved away from that as a species. We haven't really let go of that instinctual trigger that we have. So things that can happen in the workplace that cause us to feel like we're somehow less than the others or left behind or not as equally valued as others can cause us to feel our status threatened. So like that example I gave about that focus group meeting where one person kept getting left out and their input was ignored, they definitely felt like their status in that meeting was lowered, like their input didn't matter, so their status was lowered. And that probably is what caused them to get that threat reaction that we could document in their fMRI machine scans. So What we want to do is prevent people from feeling like their status is being challenged, and even to somehow boost or raise their challenge whenever possible. So obviously giving them a raise or giving them some kind of a promotion is a way to do it. But we know that that's not always possible. But you can even give people the opportunity to learn and develop new skills and then teach others. Or you can pay attention to their improvement and give them positive recognition or positive feedback that boosts their feeling of their status growing, their skill set is growing, their competence, their value is growing. You can follow my STS formula, I'll link to it, that can help you give positive feedback that's specific. And if you do it in front of others, then you can help them raise their sense of status. So I've covered the first of the 5 that I want to cover here of those trigger elements, and that is status. The second one in the SCARF acronym is certainty. We as a species don't deal well with the feeling that we don't know what's going on. So again, think about it from an evolutionary perspective. If you were out in the tundra looking for berries and you heard a rustling in the leaves and you had no idea what that was, that uncertainty did not bode well for you. You wanted to see what's going on. You didn't want to walk around in a place where that you didn't have a good view or an ability to run away. So we need to know what's going on. Even if we know that there is a threat that is imminent, knowing about it is better than not knowing about it and being in the dark, because that makes us feel anxious and unsafe. We just don't like uncertainty. So think about the workplace and how many opportunities there are for people to feel like they don't know what's going on. This is why communication is so important. This is why when we have change, it often fails because people don't like to change from what they already know. Even if the thing that you're moving towards is potentially better. You know, people sometimes say the evil we know versus the evil we don't. We just sometimes prefer to do what we know and to keep going with what we are familiar with because it feels less threatening than that uncertainty of the unknown and the different. So minimizing change, of course, minimizing uncertainty, and being upfront and as transparent as possible about it, changes, expectations can help reduce that feeling of uncertainty in people and boost their feeling of certainty. The third element is autonomy. That's the A in SCARF. We like to know what's going on, and we also like to feel like we're in control of ourselves. We are in control of our lives. Once again, if you think about that cave person, if they feel like they're bound to others, that other people make their decisions for them or even tie them down or even put them in a cage or limit their mobility or limit their ability to escape, then they feel quite threatened, right? So in our modern day, we don't like to feel out of control. We want to be able to freely respond so that when there is an actual threat to our physical safety or a social threat or an emotional threat to our well-being, we would like to be able to move away from it or to fight against it, not to be compelled in any way and to limit that ability. So in the workplace, allowing people to have ways to choose freely, even if it's among 2 limited choices, is better than having no choice. It's better than just telling them what to do or telling them what the best option is. The more that people feel like they're involved in choosing and they're involved in designing what will happen to them, the less threatened their need for autonomy will be. So that means choosing what to do or how to do it or where to do it or with whom to do it. You probably can't give them 100% autonomy in the workplace, but wherever you can, boost autonomy and minimize that feeling of being locked in or limited. You're going to help people avoid some of those uncomfortable and unproductive threat responses. Okay. So now we are up to the R in SCARF, and that stands for relatedness. We are social animals. When we were cave dwellers, we needed to make sure that we could rely on others to cooperate with us for our safety and survival. For example, no one person could do everything that needed to be done, but a group of people could share the work. One person watches the children while another person goes hunting for meat, and another person gathers berries, and another person builds weapons or builds housing or protects the camp, whatever. So we need to be able to cooperate with each other, which means that we need to feel like we're part of the group and that we have good relationships with the other people. Because if for some reason we're ostracized, or people talk behind our back, or we don't get the word about what's going on, or we feel like we're cut off from important information, or that for some reason people don't have us in good graces, they don't value us or don't like us, then our physical safety is threatened when we're back in that ancient world. But currently, it's that social threat that causes our brain to have that same threat reaction. And so we feel lonely, we feel unsafe, we feel insecure, and that does not help us be productive and be creative and be cooperative. So create opportunities for people to feel connected and related on a human level and find things that they have in common. Help them feel like they are part of the same group, the same tribe, so that there isn't this kind of in-group, out-group experience within your team. And this can help people connect with each other, build trust, build camaraderie, build bonds. A really interesting podcast episode to listen to is the one where I talk to Dr. Paul Zak about the effects of the hormone oxytocin on positive emotions and trust. And I will link to it. It's really fascinating. We really are biologically rigged to want to feel a kinship with the people with whom we work. And that when we have isolation or a threat to that, it causes us to become dysfunctional. So small talk and conversations, asking people about their weekend, giving people opportunities to eat together, drink together, having some kind of team building every once in a while, those are not a waste of time. They are a huge investment in a connection that then creates more efficient and effective communication and a more productive team. Okay, the last element of the 5 is fairness. We need to feel like we're being treated fairly and to see that others around us are also treated that way. And we react quite negatively when we feel like there is a lack of justice. And our fairness threat kicks in and causes us usually to fight or run away or become pretty unproductive, right? In that freeze response. So we want to make sure that people see what's going on in your team as fair, that you are a fair leader. And you want to make sure that you establish clear expectations, clear ground rules, and really equitable working conditions so that people have a sense of safety from fairness. So our brains are wired to avoid threat and to react to perceived threats by fighting them, fleeing from them, or sometimes just freezing from the shock. And this threat response is not limited to physical danger and has been shown to happen in social and work settings. So avoiding triggering this kind of a social threat response can help you avoid throwing those around you into a situation where they are working with diminished thinking resources. And it helps you get a more rational, better quality, and less disruptive response to your work interactions. Have you ever felt triggered by an FFF response or seen someone at work triggered by it? I am 100% sure that you have. How did you know? What were some of the signs? How did you react or how did they react? I'd love for you to tell an anecdote in the comments below or share it with me. And in general, let me know what you thought of this episode and whether it was helpful to you and how. Thanks for listening. This has been another solo episode of the TalentGrow Show. And I'm Halelly Azulay, your leadership development strategist here at TalentGrow, the company that sponsors the TalentGrow Show. And I appreciate that you've listened. I look forward to hearing back from you and you sharing this with others. And until the next time, make today great.
Thanks for listening to the TalentGrow Show, where we help you develop your talent to become the kind of leader that people want to follow. For more information, visit talentgrow.com.